Hello, Dr. Sharma.
Hello, you can call me Monica. Oh, how lovely to see you. How are you today? Tell me, how are you?
Well, I must admit, I'm excited to interview someone like you who has had so many experiences all around the world and dealing with transformative leadership and many projects fostering collaboration.
And
So,
mostly through the UN, huh?
yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
And I read some of your story and I was really impressed. I would like to start talking about transformational leadership, which is the main topic of this call. So, um, in your book, the title of your book is Radical Transformational Leadership. So, how can this radical transformational leadership be achieved?
Radical means root of. And it doesn't mean what we usually think it means. That means radical people or radical something. I'm very clear. Radical is root of. And so root of is a mathematical term. And at the root of our being, we have some evidence by very eminent scientists and people who are in social work. We have some evidence on our radical being. This radical being has some innate qualities. It has like, it's not like the quality of a character, but it's like our innate, inherent self. So, one thing we know worldwide is that people want to live with self esteem and self worth. In fact, today in COVID counseling times, one of the most important things for youth, for adults, is to live with a sense of self worth. And this was Daniel Goleman's research, when I was a medical student, we used to be taught IQ is very important,
Mhm.
intellectual quotient. Now we know the most important predictor of success is EQ, emotional intelligence, the ability to actually look at who I am. It's actually very simple. And he says self awareness, knowing who I am, is very important in this work.
Mhm.
So we begin with knowing who we are. And guess what? Human beings worldwide, because I've worked in more than 65 countries. And in my life, I've worked as global director in United Nations of different programs. And you will find this everywhere. You will find people with an innate sense of self that when I cultivate that space, we say socially that is dignity. Respect is nothing. It's not respect. Looking up to is not respect. Respect is recognizing this greatness of self-worth and dignity and committing that whether I like the person or not, whether I agree with the person's actions or not, every human being is actually entitled to a life of dignity. And to me, I've worked with people who've been in prison, done things that society does not agree with. There too, dignity. And to me, there's a second part of our radical self, and that is a sense of fairness. Fairness is a sense that starts very early,
Mhm.
very early. And Oxfam did a study in the US and found that 92% of Americans actually believe in fairness.
Wow.
Now, propaganda may have said something else, but guess what? The Sustainable Development Goals that all countries have agreed to are based on equity. Equity is nothing but fairness in action, in structure, in system. So, guess what? Radical has a beautiful meaning. It means root of our being, individually and together. You see, so it's about unleashing this spirit in us,
Mhm.
radical spirit in us, which is being true to myself. And then we have a very strong word that every culture knows. It's called compassion. And compassion is even stronger than empathy because there's something in us and I know as humans we have mirror neurons, there's something in us, Carlo, that when we see suffering and our heart is open, not full of prejudice and thoughts and all that, when our heart of love for everybody is open, not just for my family, my people, my this, then compassion awakes and I'm called to act. This I have seen everywhere. It doesn't matter whether I'm rich or I'm poor. It exists in everybody, every culture. And we've used these tools and templates that are there in the book, Radical Transformational Leadership. We've used it as grassroots and we've used it at all levels. It's not about top down or bottom up. It's about inside, activating my pattern mind and going outside differently. And then the second thing is, there's something when I stand in my compassion and I see injustice and I see somebody else's loss of dignity, I just act. I want to make a difference. And it's these stories that are so important. And I can give you stories from around the world, about how people stood up. So I'll begin with Africa, because it's the same thing. It's the same as Italy, where you were born. So there was this work on inheritance and inheritance of property. And basically one woman stood up and said, I believe in equity. I stand for equity and fairness. She said, we were working on HIV and AIDS, and at that time, if a man died of AIDS, the property was taken back by his family, and the woman was left without any income and had to look after the kids. And she said, I decided last night, I told my husband, I cannot live with myself. I know I am equity and equality. So we are returning everything to our sister-in-law. And I remember in the room they said, but that's our culture. She said, if I don't change my culture, who's going to change it? The moment you and I, Carlos, see a gap in our own behavior, our own ego, and what we want to do, we will make a difference. And that's how we've mobilized people. When people themselves see the gap, then they start doing transformation. For us, transformation is changing the system and culture one step at a time wherever I am. And all the tools and templates we learn, RTL has about 62 tools and templates, very simple. And we say, you want to be a tennis champion, then you practice tennis, right? You want to end poverty, but we will not practice anything. How is that possible? We will not learn anything new. No, we know. We will use the same tools we've used for many years, and we will make a difference. How is that possible? I want to end poverty. I want to manifest SDGs. I practice new learning. I first expose myself. I need to have what in Buddhism is called beginner's mind. I need to stop this clutter. So it's actually very simple, because human beings can do it worldwide. So I stand in what I care about deeply, which is universal. We call it universal. What do we mean by universal? It's the UN definition. It means it applies to everybody everywhere, like human rights. And this is not about talking about human rights. It's about embodying the values under human rights. It's not an intellectual process. Unfortunately, the world engages with human rights largely as an intellectual process and largely focuses on violations. It does not focus on self-actualization. It does not promote that. And this is not about religiosity or that kind of, it's about our full potential, our inner potential, where we emerge. It's about our pattern mind that sees culture and systems, because and it transforms it and it does something. I'm in action. One word about the pattern mind. I always knew it was important, but we have this myth that pattern mind, only educated people can see systems. If they have a PhD in systems thinking, then they can see it. And I always knew everybody has a pattern mind, whether I have formal education or not. Do you think farmers around the world don't know about weather patterns? Do you think that parents don't know about some patterns? So what we know is everyone has a pattern mind. How do we stimulate that and stop making systems change into an elitist thought process, which it is today in
Yes.
academia? And largely, I would say, it doesn't matter whether I'm young or old. I just look at it that way. And so for me, what I find about youth is that you have less life experience that prejudices you. Therefore, you're more open in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I find about youth. Not that youth don't have ego. They are just like once you're about age 8 and beyond. I mean, it's just, there's nothing wrong with ego. Healthy ego, important. But
Mm-hmm.
healthy ego that's dominating everybody else, that's not important. Exclusionary ego, not important. So basically, Carlo, you and I, we have three major issues that the world is grappling with.
Mm-hmm.
One is inequity, lack of equity. In a world of abundance, we have 1 billion people going to bed hungry.
Yes.
Before COVID, 22,000 people died every day of malnutrition. Why
Mm-hmm.
didn't we talk about it? Because they were poor in income, maybe rich in their heart. So you see, there's something that in us that till it affects us, we don't look at it. And even when we look at it, we don't have the tools to strategize based on dignity, equity, and compassion with everyone involved. So radical transformational leadership is simple. It can be done by everybody everywhere. And the book that you referred to, it has 100 examples from all over the world. And it's about men, women, and all genders. Maybe they were working, maybe they were in their homes. The stories we tell people in our homes,
Mm-hmm.
how we bring up our children, how we interpret the world to our children. That's how it begins. How in school, it's about breaking down our stereotypes. It's about involving everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but we just don't think that way. So, yeah, it's actually simple. It's very simple, but it requires practice. Like, if I want to be a tennis champion, for me, everybody has the potential to be a radical transformational leader.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody. The choice is everybody's, young or older, whether I have money or I don't. And it is, in my view, the only way we can break the patterns of prejudice, such as racism in the US, casteism in India, um, racism of a different kind in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
tribalism elsewhere, elitism, ageism, where we leave the youth out, or we leave old people out, it doesn't matter, or ableism, where, you know, we have a prejudice, oh, those people with some disability, what can they do?
It's really enlightening to hear this, and I mean, I totally agree with the potential that we have as human beings. Let's say it's part of our humanity, compassion, being able to make an impact in our everyday life. And if we all work, let's say, for a better world by doing also small things, but practicing doing it on a daily basis, helping people, not looking just at us. Of course, we need to be able to help others first. It's necessary that we look and act, not just because it can be, let's say, positive for us. I mean, I totally resonate with what you were saying about the talent that everybody has, the ability that everybody has to help others, to make an impact to radically transform society?
The world is very individualistic now.
Mm-hmm.
What I hear you saying is, can we move from individualism to interdependence? Because what happens to me happens to others. And there's a very beautiful quotation. I think it is from Australia or from New Zealand, and it is by the first people there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something like, I think that was Leela Watson, and she said, if you have come to help me, uh, you may go, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if your liberation is tied with mine, let's talk. There is enough knowing that in any organization, any university, any network, like you are part of a youth network, if 10% of people shift, then the entire network will shift. It's a mathematical model by a scholar called Zai from the US and with
Mm-hmm.
others. So what we know is there's something about authentic, true to self, because unfortunately, a lot of movements also have a lot of ego built into it. You are actually laying down the principles of next generation movements. In the next generation movement, whether that's a youth movement, a social movement, or whatever, we begin from a co-creative space where movement leaders learn to transcend their own ego before they ask the world to transcend their egos. Or when a youth leader asks the older people who normally don't listen to you, please listen to us. It's about ego and it's about culture, how they've been in. Then I need to look at my own culture and I need to transcend. So you laid down these few things of co-creation, of talent in everyone, of
Mm-hmm.
being able to move beyond reactivity to this deep compassion that we hold. And that indeed, Carlo, is the new kind of youth movement we need. Yeah. You know, I had prepared based on your questions a few
Mm-hmm.
slides.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know if you ever want me to show them. And I could walk you through that. And, you could retain, because the issues you raised relate to that set of slides. So it looks like this, but I'll go to the first slide. So you asked me, Carlo, to
Mm-hmm.
talk about transformational leadership in times of crisis. So I want to use COVID-19 examples that apply to the entire world, whether that's Europe, US, Africa, Asia, India, and I'll give you real life examples. So the first thing we will work on is a question that the SDGs are asking. And I'm not sure all of us, or most of us even, use tools and templates to generate equitable results instead of talking about equitable results. Because equity, we think, is a zero-sum game,
Mm-hmm.
that if you have more, I have less. But that's not what is the issue in an abundant world. So I will talk about the CFSR model, conscious, full spectrum, response model, and it is what you called about the talent we have. I can call it our talent model, actually, and it will be the same. And the next thing is, when we are responding to COVID with what we must do for our survival, do we know how to build resilience? It's not just about caring out there, it's about self-care, because if I don't build my self-esteem, I don't touch that space in myself. I'm human. My ego will work over time. No question. No matter how great my intention is. So basically, self-care begins, then family, workplace, society, global, local.
Mm-hmm.
And in today's world, in India, there is difference. There's a lot of, like domination and exclusion. and that is casteism.
Mm-hmm.
Today in the US, we are talking of racism. We have classism, the rich, income rich people. Their heart may not be that rich yet. It's there though, it's there
Mm-hmm.
in everybody. So, transformational leadership in crisis, the first thing we must do is we must be able to provide what people need right now. If people don't have food, we must give food because, you and I, we will not live without food, water.
Mm-hmm.
We need healthcare. Today, more people are dying worldwide who are older,
Mm-hmm.
who have less access to healthcare. COVID-19 is showing us what is missing. And then we have stigma and discrimination, which we had before COVID times. Whenever we have fear, we get into panic because our brainstem works overtime and we just say, so and so has brought the problem. So
Mm-hmm.
and so is responsible for the problem. We externalize it. Then we start discriminating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the migrants did it.
Yeah.
And this is part of our entire story. We are
Mm-hmm.
always hunting to externalize because we don't have the maturity nor the humility to actually look at what needs to happen or the courage to create an alternative. And the UN is about universal values of dignity, the Human Rights Convention, the Paris Convention. It's about non-discrimination. It's about freedom. Freedom as liberation, not freedom to hate. It's a different kind of freedom. And we say we need to embody that. There is something in us where when we see suffering, we just don't pass it. We go there and do something. We respond. I call that compassion. And when we see injustice, we respond. We don't just talk about the values, but we don't act because you're right or wrong. We don't act because it's rational to act. We act because we deeply care. What we know is when we activate our whole self, how do we discern what needs to be done? How do we stop this judgmental mind that youth have, adults have, so that we can actually hold the greatness of people? Education has been a way of segmenting people. Knowledge has been given to people. Even now, there are those schools which have laptops, everything. And in COVID times, they continued classes.
Yeah.
And then there are those schools and children who have no access, including in a rich country like the
Mm-hmm.
US. I want to share one thing more about COVID,
Of
and it's
course.
related to this frame. So the frame is to both respond and realize. And the thing is that our conventional patterns, they are not wrong. It is how we did it. When we are in a hurry, we think that we don't need to look at values. That values come only after we respond right now. But guess what? We will have one project after the other. We'll have projectitis and no change. We'll have one epidemic after another and we will not learn. The issues that I faced during the early times of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, where I worked globally through UNDP, is the same. There was no testing. Those people who had no access, firstly, there was no treatment. Even when treatment came, who got the treatment? Those who can afford it. It was priced so high
Yeah.
that people who, just couldn't afford it. People died in different parts of the world because profit was the major issue. And so HIV/AIDS was about power dynamics in the boardroom and the bedroom. Why bedroom? Because people would not use condoms for safe sex. Just like we are refusing you use masks.
Mm-hmm.
And we consider mask to be an erosion of freedom. Freedom is not a mask or no mask. That's a preference. Freedom is about caring for everyone. So we say you must begin by anchoring yourself in dignity, in fairness, and in compassion. What we talked about. our innate being, our innate being, then we must respond to the problem. So yes, we must give food. We must have ways for people to get cash and income. We must be able to look at what problems we are facing. But we must also realize the full potential of individuals and of our systems. Our systems need to be based on those values. We need both at the same time. And there are tools we can use. At the same time, what we know is that we can have short-term strategies that build long-term, short-term together. The fact that we are looking only at survival and health, we are not looking at resilience building, which requires me to anchor myself in my values and build the capacity to deal with adversity, not out of fear and panic, but out of the strength that every one of us has. We are also talking a lot about individual and collective trauma and distress during COVID. And what we know that distress happened before COVID, we never saw it. It's only accentuated by the crisis. So if we want that, we need well-being. And throughout the world, we are talking about mental health and well-being. We are talking about it based on dignity, fairness, and compassion. And we are talking about interrupting the systems that create trauma, racism, casteism, classism. Classism is elitism. Migrant labor are responsible. Tribalism. So if we cannot interrupt isms, we will continue to have individual collective trauma. Before COVID, it was there. During COVID, it's accentuated. We have more violence worldwide. Domestic violence has increased worldwide, whether the country was income rich or income poor. And so violence is a sign of what was there before. We've legitimized violence in movies. None of us talk about that. We've legitimized violence in our social media, in the games we play. We've normalized violence. The violence that we said is human. We have not normalized equity and peace because we chose not to. Humans have 3 brains, you know, and we have a brain stem, which is our very old brain, which taught us to be survivors. We looked at, the brain is very strong. It's about survival and it's about reproduction of the species. Then we have our mammalian emotional brain, and we are fed during COVID times from that agitated survival brain into looking at social prejudice and accentuating that. Youth can transform it if they learn the tools how to do that. And so for me, the third brain, our neocortex, our most recent brain, and our whole consciousness, which is not just the brain, it's part of our heart. So to me, when I can work that part, we will make a big difference. We will make the difference that we will have a youth movement that is different. We will have a people's movement that is different. We will begin where you began, our universal values. We will move from little things to activating what you called talent that exists in everyone, everywhere. It's inside, activating mind to think differently, to have a different outside. And to me, strategies, as we saw, must respond to the problem and realize full potential, but it must be based on universal values. That people are inherent worldwide. And you said something that was lovely, Carlo. And that was, it's about our everyday actions, everywhere, by everybody. So thank you for the comments that you made and your reflections. And I think now I will stop this. And so we can go back to you What are your thoughts?
Well, that was again very, very interesting to listen to. All these many information that um, draw this picture of a humanity that has the potential to change, that still needs to make a great effort, but there are solutions for the problems that we created. Of course, you said we need a different way of thinking. We cannot act the same. We cannot think that they just can be solved the way we used to solve them in the past. And today, where we are even more interconnected and where this pandemic shows us that we are all equal because everybody is subject to diseases, everybody is in danger, but still the problem is that not everybody has the opportunity to survive. And many times this has to do with this kind of society that we have, which is based on profit, on economy, on money, on power, and which is not an equal society, which doesn't look at people being on the same level, but with differences based on money or, I don't know, good families versus bad families, so to speak, or poor realities against rich realities. But again, it's not dealing with the human side of our species. It's just considering the the system that we created, the society system that we created, but it's not tackling the problem at its roots. It's just trying to solve it at the surface, and which is not effective at all, of course. And I thought it was really interesting when you talked about, when we speak about having rights, but also have duties to make those rights be respected. Many times people just care about the rights, so they feel entitled to do whatever they want because they have the right of being free. But at the same time, many forget that they also have the duty to make those rights be respected. And when something is wrong and something bad is being done, we all have the duty to react and stop those actions and make those rights be respected for everybody, not just for us or for a small part of the population, but for everybody. And I thought it was really enlightening again to listen to you with this presentation. And I'm really thankful for this PowerPoint presentation and for your words, because it was really clear. Again, I want to thank you for your words and for this presentation. You know, being young in this time is, of course, difficult for as for every generation. It's difficult to be young in the times. There are problems of our times that change for every generation. And today, I really hope that with the work that we all are doing for making a change, for making an impact, I really hope that we will be able to found this global movement based on equality, based on working together. We don't have much time left, indeed, to react, because as many, almost all all the scientists say that we don't have much time, and this is a big problem that we need to face together with all the others. So, um, yeah, I think.
Thank you for inviting me, Carlo. I'm sure that you, with your team, I wish you the best. You
Thank
will
you.
be looking at this differently. So
Yes,
thank you.
we will try. And thanks to you for accepting this invitation, for all those interesting insights as a person who's worked and is passionate about all those issues. So again, thank you very much for your time. And well, I hope to see you one day.
Yes.
Meet you in person. That would be great. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.